The Hogsty is brought to you by TicketClub.com, your one-stop shop for live events nationwide. Whether you're looking for game, theater, or live performance tickets, don't sweat it. TicketClub.com has you covered. So make sure you're going there for all your live entertainment needs, and make sure you're clicking over to them from the banner at the top of thehogsty.com.
It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and John Worrell. And now, here's your host, Chris Leary. Welcome back to another episode of It's Just Business. I am, of course, not Chris Leary, which is probably good for Chris. Chris is out this weekend, so we do have our super sub, Alex, with us. Alex, how are you?
Doing good, man. We're getting thin now. With Chris and John's been out for a while for personal reasons. Now Chris, it's basically the Steve.
Well, that's true. That's true. And Chris is a much better host than me. I'm a terrible host. By the way, It's Just Business is a show where we talk about the business of sports, sports media, sports law, all that good stuff that I love. Maybe none of you, out there love it, but at least I do. But I do miss having Chris and John on the show. We do. Alex, you're a great sub. But Chris and John each bring something to the show. We do have a lot of good stuff to do this week, on this show, and we're going to kind of meld the Hogsty and It's Just Business on our first topic here, which is Trent Williams. Trent Williams is certainly a national story, not just a Redskin story, which is, I guess, while we're doing it here. And so we're not going to talk about the football part of it here, but there's a lot of interesting stuff going on with him in terms of league stuff, and that's what we're going to address here. So as a background for those of you who aren't Redskins fans, Trent Williams has been holding out since the beginning of training camp, since the beginning of mandatory OTAs, actually. And the reason he did was there were all a bunch of rumors that it was about medical, it was about money, and we finally got Trent's side of it. He hadn't spoken until this week.
He showed up to the team this week,
right?
Which. Just to bring that part of the business side in, he had to show up this week because the team could put him on one of their exempt lists for 2 weeks. And for him to get their accrued season, he needed to show up this week so he could play in 6 games or whatever.
Yeah, and I'm not going to bore you with the details of that, but it basically goes back to a grievance hearing for years and years ago. And
something Joey Galloway.
Yeah, it was a Joey Galloway decision, and I don't want to get into all that here. The bottom line is that if he didn't report before the expiration of the trade deadline, there was no way he was going to for sure get an accrued season, and that's why he reported. So when he reported, he went to the locker room, and when he went to the locker room, it was open season on the press. He talked for 18 minutes to the press about everything that happened to him. And so I'm trying to decide how much we want to get into this here.
Let's just
go ahead.
Thumbnail. He had not brain cancer, but a cancerous tumor on his head that was about to hit his brain, and he had to have surgery on it, and he apparently had it for 6 years. And the team, he went to the team said it was nothing 6 years ago. That's his side of the story anyway. And now there's do you want to get into the lawsuit side of it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, because that's what we want to talk about. This third-party medical review
Okay,
lawsuit.
Yeah, let me set this up more here, though. So, Trent this week in the locker room said that he had gone to the team trainers 6 years ago, and he was concerned about the growth that was on his head. And according to him, the trainer said, this is nothing, don't worry about it. And then he basically let it go for 6 years until it became so big he was concerned about it. There are other reports that say now that have been floating around for months, actually, that say the trainers did tell him to go see a specialist, and that he just didn't do it. So there's a whole other side of this that's going to come out. And so after Trent said all of this in the locker room, which is basically saying, on ground zero, because the training room is right outside the locker room, right at ground zero, that the training staff basically committed perhaps medical malpractice, depending on who he's talking about. So what the Redskins did was really what we're going to talk about here. Is the Redskins invoked a provision of the collective bargaining agreement that says you can ask for an independent medical review of medical records. And so the panel that's going to do the independent review is one doctor that is selected by the NFL, one is selected by the NFLPA, and then those two doctors will select a third. So that's That is what's going to happen. Now, my contention here is that the reason why the Redskins are doing this is to protect themselves, and frankly, they already know what's in the medical records because they have the medical records, and I don't think that they would even want this done unless they already knew they were going to win. So that's my thought, is this just all to protect themselves against the allegations Trent has made?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds about right. I'm me deep down, I'm kind of hoping that Trent wins this thing just more out of personal reasons than, logic. But to get to this medical thing, the one thing that I found very interesting about the Redskins' response is that they basically said, we're not going to talk at all now, and we're going to do everything through this review board. And they claimed that, it's because of the HIPAA thing. They can't say anything, but there's plenty they could have responded to in Trent's allegations about the team that I don't think would have violated the whole HIPAA review. They could have responded. He claimed that no one from the team visited him. He claims that nobody from the team, took it seriously to begin with, that he had this cancer scare. You could have responded to that kind of stuff, the more personal, managerial kind of stuff.
Sure, yeah, and I have to say that Trent's story was very inconsistent in a lot of ways. What we got, I think I told you this.
His story has been inconsistent too.
Yeah. But I think what I told you offline was that this story is kind of like reading a petition without seeing the evidence and the deposition transcripts to go along with it, because Trent's made all these allegations. Again, it's amazing that it happened in the locker room, but he made all these allegations, but then at the same time, he said it's also about money. He talked independently about how he wanted more guaranteed money in this, and that whether or not the medical had happened, he still would have been disgruntled, because of the money. So it's foolish to think that this is just about medical stuff. It's really about both, which is what we've said, at least I've said on this show for a long time.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone's ever disagreed that it's about both to an extent. It's just how it's kind of like playing a percentages game. Is it 66% money, 33% medical, or is it the other way around? Who knows?
Well, yeah, and the other thing that he was very inconsistent about was, who has talked to him and who visited him, because he said nobody visited me, and then we learned that the team trainer was in Chicago with him for a week. For example.
But who said that?
It was a media report. It was a media report. Yeah. So again, we don't know what's true and what's not true. There was a lot of conflicting reports about this. But as to this,
somebody's lying to the media. That's the
for sure, from that. For sure. And I think no matter what, it's inexcusable that Bruce Allen and Dan Snyder didn't go to Chicago and visit this man. I mean, he was in the hospital for 2 weeks. This is not like a normal skin cancer thing. You go in, you get this thing burned off your face, and that's the end of it. He had a very rare form of cancer I'd never heard of called DSFP. Never heard of it. Don't claim to be an expert in it. But, 2 weeks is a long time to be in the hospital. That's serious.
He was told, basically, get your affairs in order. You're probably going to die.
Yeah. My gosh. And they didn't even bother to go see him. That's just, that all by itself is inexcusable. So, but let's... Yeah, go ahead.
There's a random tidbit. Our friend Rick Snyder posted this on Twitter that I thought was interesting. Remember, he had a heart attack when he was covering the team.
Yeah, he's talked about that many times on our airwaves.
Yeah. Well, one thing he kind of pointed out is when he had his heart attack and was in the hospital, even Vinny Serrato went and visited him. And he's just a beat reporter.
Which is amazing. Yeah, if Vinny came and visited him, and Vinny's a buffoon. Yeah, so let's get back to this. Where we go from here. So the big question I have really is, what happens once this independent medical review is done? To what end? Because Trent definitely hasn't made any formal allegations. When we say allegations, all we mean is this press conference that he did, which wasn't really a press conference. It was him sitting in his locker room with a bunch of reporters around him. Right. That's the only thing he's ever alleged. And so he's not filed a grievance with the NFL. He's not
claiming there's a crime or anything.
No, and he's not asked for compensation. He's not made anything. And so this is sort of like a preemptive strike against that. Because again, I don't think the Redskins, knowing litigation like I do, you don't ask for something like this unless you already know what the result's going to be, okay? Because the Redskins medical staff has the records. They know for sure what he was advised and when it was advised, because all of this stuff is already in the medical records. So, this is not a case of we need to find out the truth. This is a case of we want other people to say the truth to support us. I don't blame the Redskins for doing it. I just kind of wonder, okay, so this happens, then what? Then what from the Redskins' perspective, I think that's it. It's done and there's no case. Now, what does Trent really want from here out of this? I mean, other than just to leave the Redskins? That's a good question.
It seems to me that this is quickly and very obviously becoming Trent. One, I don't think he particularly likes the medical staff, and that's
there's
for sure. Many players that we've heard that from.
Yeah.
That the medical staff's not great.
Yeah.
But it really seems like, people are asking point blank, can Dan fix this relationship? Sure. Trent kind of made it seem like Dan Snyder's not the problem. Then they asked him about the relationship with Bruce Allen, the general manager, and he went crickets. So
very clearly, it's Bruce Allen is the problem.
I jokingly put up a little picture on our Twitter on the Hogsty saying, hey, I found a helmet that'll make Trent happy, and it just says, we will fire Bruce Allen inside of it.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, that was really good. That was funny. So that's the CBA part of it is there's not really a step two, okay?
Yeah, it's not clear what the end game for either party is other than Trent wants to be off the team.
Yeah, and there's just, I guess the point here is that there's not a continuing process that's going to happen. They're going to do an independent medical review, and that's it. Then the report's going to come out, and the Redskins are going to read it, and presumably if somebody finds, which I think is unlikely, that the Redskins medical staff has done something wrong, they'll have to do something about it. And that's the end of it. It doesn't really have anything to do with Trent's status as a player.
I know this is a vaguer part of the CBA. Do you know what are the repercussions either way in these reviews?
Well, it's not really. No, that's my point. Is there's not really a repercussion. You could, if Trent was to file a grievance against the NFL or against the Redskins, it says, you guys screwed up my medical diagnosis and this is your fault and this and that. You could use the independent report would become evidence in such a grievance. And so this is like a preemptive strike against that. Okay. But there's not been a grievance filed. It doesn't sound like there's going to be unless something changes. So this is just, kind of a preemptive strike against a grievance. Other than that, there's nothing to do.
The only thing that we've heard the Redskins want is they want to hold Trent up somehow so that they can keep him at 2 years on his contract. And, I wonder if this is a stall tactic for that.
No, because it's not a stall tactic because it's going to take months. And two, this is not really keeping anybody from doing anything. It's not a stall tactic. Gotcha. The stall tactic is the roster exemption.
Right.
That's the stall tactic. And really... so basically, now that Trent has failed his physical because of what he claimed was pain wearing a helmet, if the Redskins cannot find a helmet that works for him, and if you think they're going to find a helmet that works for him, I have Swampland in Florida to sell you.
Right.
They're going to have to put him on what's called the NFI list. And the NFI list is the non-football related injury list, and that's really a breach of contract. That's a CBA, it's a CBA remedy, because if you get injured outside of football, then the team has the right to take your salary. But it still counts towards an accrued year, unless the Redskins filed a separate grievance that said basically Trent's not acting in good faith with any of this. This is all nonsense, and he doesn't deserve to have a accrued season.
It gets rather wild on that part.
It could get really ugly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to get ugly. I think could is, you don't need to use that. It's just going to be
It already is ugly, and why on earth they would let this back into the locker room is just beyond me. When I was advocating to keep him, and not trade him.
You were always advocating that so that because you thought they could fix the relationship.
Yeah, that's the point. And if Dan Snyder could have fixed this by. At least he could have tried to fix it by going to visit him, sit down with him. Don't say, hey, I'll fire the medical staff for you. You sit down to a man-to-man and say, we have a problem. How do we solve it? That's what they could have done. They didn't do it. What I definitely was not advocating was just do nothing for 2 months and then let the man come in and throw the whole locker room into chaos. That's certainly not what I was ever advocating. So why they let that happen?
At what point is Trent just going to go up to Bruce Allen's office and pee on the floor? That's where this is going to.
Yeah, so. That's crazy. So that's Trent Williams. There's definitely more to come on that. So we'll see. It's going to be not drama for at a minimum the next 2 weeks.
I'm sure we'll talk about it Wednesday on our normal Hogside podcast. Let's move on, though, because we have another major story that's business related. And that is, when I'm super subbing, it's this story probably comes up half the time. And it's the NCAA players want to get paid story. Big breakthrough there, Steve. Why don't you tell me about what exactly the legal side of it is?
Good God, the NCAA is awful. So the whole point, the story revolves around the idea that there are various state governments, and now there's also about to be a bill sponsored in Congress that makes it illegal for a school to punish a student athlete for signing not getting paid for signing independent third-party sponsorship deals, okay? And so the state of California kicked this off a while ago, and we talked about that 2 months ago on this show, where the state of California has passed a bill and signed into law a law that takes effect in 2023 that says what I just said. Schools in the state of California can't stop student athletes from signing endorsement deals. So there's been a bunch of different states that have followed suit, and again, there's a bill in Congress. So now, the reason why we're bringing this up again is that just this past week, the chairman of the NCAA Board of Governors said that the NCAA has reconsidered their position and that they did actually vote to clear the way to, quote, allow amateur athletes to benefit from the use of their name, image, and likeness. And the story I'm reading is from AP. It's called The Latest NCAA Hopes to Avoid Court Fight on Compensation, dated October 29th, 2019. So the NCAA now basically has said, okay, we're going to allow this, but it needs to be on our terms. Which, as bad and awful as the NCAA is, because the NCAA, make no mistake, is an abomination.
Oh, they're one of the most corrupt sports organizations in the world.
Yeah. Oh, for
it's
sure.
Like them, FIFA, and then maybe the Olympics.
Yeah, and FIFA's I don't know if anybody's actually getting criminally bribed here. There might not be criminal fraud,
FIFA,
but
okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't ranking them. I'm just saying those are the big three.
Yeah, because FIFA guys went to jail. That's not gonna happen. But it's corrupt and it's all about making money, and that's what it's about. And so the interesting part here is this. When the NCAA says they voted and they want this, they don't really mean that. What they mean is that they want to drag this process out, and they want to come kicking and screaming into the 21st century about this, and they're trying to avoid having bills passed in a bunch of different states and in Congress. Now, I think they actually have a legitimate point is that you can't have some states allow this and some states don't, and then still be consistent within the NCAA. Now, I would argue that if the NCAA blows up and dies, we'd be better off, number one. But here's my concern about it. I wonder how you feel about this, because here's my concern. I think my concern about it is that if, the 1 or 2% of athletes who may really make a lot of money, like the Tua Tagliavoas of the world or the Zion Williamses of the world, they're going to sign multi-million-dollar deals with Nike when they're 18-year-old freshmen. They are going to be driving. One of these politicians in Congress said they're concerned about, students driving Ferraris, and he was kind of being, hypothetical about it. Yeah, tongue-in-cheek about it. But that's what's always concerned me about it, is I don't think it's a good thing to have professionalism in a college locker room. That's what concerns me. I don't so much care if it's the second baseman at the University of Illinois does a car dealership ad. Who cares? But if you've got a bunch of agents and lawyers around these very, very wealthy student athletes, because don't think that Nike won't pay the next Zion Williamson millions up front, and then you really and truly do have a professional basketball team, at college. And that concerns me, because I think that bastardizes the intent of amateurism, even though the truth of the matter is amateurism died a long time ago. That's what concerns me about it. I think that's what we have a right to be concerned about.
And I think I agree with you in principle. It concerns me too on that level, but and we were talking about the political alliances that have kind of come out of this. We were talking about that before the show, and it's kind of weird because you and I are pretty far off politically. But I think we both are concerned about that same thing. It's just that neither of us really have an answer of what do you do about it.
Well, I have an answer. I do have an answer. Here's what I would do. I think you have to place limitations on this, because I do think it's unfair for athletes to not be able to make any money on themselves. Because if you have like a music scholarship or whatever, nobody's going to care if, like the bass player for the Red Hot Chili Peppers or whatever goes to college. Nobody cares, right?
Right.
I'm making that up, but I mean, or like some kid at Juilliard becomes rich and famous, or like a kid on like an academic scholarship goes out and does a TV show. Nobody cares about it whatsoever, and they would applaud him.
Now, but a lot of kids, when they're in school, if they're on like let's say a scientific academic scholarship, there are those weird things that say, well, the school owns any patents for anything you come up with.
Well, that's different. That's a research thing. That's because they're using school resources and everything. I'm saying
right.
that.
But I'm saying like that's the closest parallel on an academic that.
Yeah, but if like Claire Danes, for example, went to Harvard, the actress.
Yeah.
And
still did movies.
Yeah, nobody cared. I don't know if she was on a scholarship, but she probably was getting some sort of scholarship on. I would assume. But okay, so fundamentally, nobody should care about athletes. But here's what I would do. I would say you can go out and get your third-party endorsement deals. However, the deals you get have to have nothing to do with the university. No booster can be involved in it, and no company in which a booster has any interest in whatsoever can be involved in it. Because you can have what you would do is you set up an independent, like a limited partnership, and have the general partner be somebody not associated with the school, and it's really funded through the limited partners who are boosters at Alabama. I would say no company that you sign an endorsement deal with can have any ownership or above a certain percent of ownership of or funding from a booster or from anybody associated with the school. If you do that, then I don't know how you get away from it. And just like this, I don't know how you get away from getting the millionaires in, with Nike money. I don't know.
I don't think there's. Listen, I don't think there's going to be a way to completely stop it. But I mean, yeah, that's one big concern of mine is. So we know Nike has that tight relationship with Oregon, and we know Under Armour has a very tight relationship with the University of Maryland. Like, what's going to stop? We have to make sure that schools that are tight with these major manufacturers, it's not like, oh, if you go here, you're going to get a $25,000 contract from all these, Nike, Under Armour, Adidas, whoever, right off the bat.
Well, and that's really the problem, right? Isn't that the problem? Because it's already – I'll just tell you that from my perspective, I've been really turned off to college football for a lot of years. I don't watch a lot of college football anymore. I mean, I'll go back and watch the tape for when we do our draft preview and stuff, but I don't watch a lot of college football on Saturday anymore because I'm so disgusted by the idea that it's just the same haves and have-nots every year. And if you have this ruling where or not this rule, if this policy comes into play where these guys can go get sponsorship money.
If it's the total Wild West, it's gonna be worse.
Yeah.
Different have and have-nots. I think that's going to change quickly.
But it's still going to be the power conferences, and there's going to be the same group of teams. Because who's going to go play for the University of Minnesota when he can go make Nike money in Oregon? I'm making that up, but that's my problem.
And I think that's exactly how it'll work.
And I think that's the concern about this. You have to stop this. You have to stop that from happening to keep college football and basketball, especially on a level keel.
And I think you also need to keep on watching out for players getting bribed before committing to a school in the first place.
Which is already happening.
That's always been a problem.
Yeah, well, and there's a FBI investigation going on about that. So maybe, so my solution keeps the Title IX part of it out of it, and it keeps the boosters from just outright bribing these people because, but what it doesn't stop is having professional millionaires in locker rooms through Nike money. And so maybe, there needs to be a cap, maybe.
Well, I don't know if you could do a cap on.
You could do a cap. It just isn't smart.
People are getting played because we're both fairly free market on this.
I'm just saying. I'm throwing out an idea. Okay, make your money, but there can be a cap of X amount on the deals you can sign. I don't know.
And this is a different can of worms, and I've talked about this for a while. I could definitely see a cap on saying if you are making over, let's say, $200,000. You don't need a athletic scholarship at this point. So they could pull you can still be in the school,
pull the athletic scholarship.
Yeah.
See
some kind of needs-based cap.
I don't think it would stop anything. Is the problem.
I don't think it would stop anything, but it at least somewhat levels things
because then you
out.
just have Nike paying tuition. You know,
Right.
I mean, I hear you. It's a possibility. I don't know if that's the solution because I don't think anybody would really care.
It might be part of a solution. It's not nothing. I don't think there's any full solution for any of this yet.
Or maybe, I mean, or maybe you just carve out the big shoe deals and say you can't sign big shoe deals. Sorry. But that goes kind of contrary to the concept of independent market also, I don't know. I mean, it's such a tough thing. The NCAA is not being honest, and they are looking out for themselves. But they have a point. Excuse me. If it's the Wild West, it's a real problem. And basketball would be worse than even football because basketball, there's even a smaller pool of schools. Then you truly have, like Duke would have 5 professional athletes, 5 multimillionaire professional athletes. Kansas would have 5 multimillionaire professional athletes.
I mean, they already have 5 professional athletes at Duke. Yeah. Now they're just paying them and above the table.
Above the table, yeah, that's right. Yeah, above the table. So I don't know what the solution is. I don't think the solution is just everybody can go do whatever they want with no repercussions. That's, you have to get the boosters out of it, like I said, and you have to do something to keep the agents and lawyers out of the locker room.
Yeah, and that because I mean this is going to get really unseemly really quick if we just I mean I in principle like what they started in California because I'm for players getting money. That's fine. But we got to hone this thing out way more than it's honed out.
Really and truly, if you really want to get radical about it, I think the NCAA almost needs to go. And also, and not only that though, but along with that, let's stop pretending that football and basketball are true university amateur sports.
Right. They're not.
It's professional.
They're not Olympic level type stuff, which you got to remember, like old school university sports was you did well at your university and then you went to the Olympics. That was it. That used to be up until like the 1940s or so. That's kind of how sports were at universities. I
mean, the problem is like there are some Division I schools, like the lower end ones, where it truly is just amateur athletics. What we're talking about are like the top 25, it's professional, or top whatever. And don't limit it to 25.
Sport,
yeah. So there are football programs at, like Rhode Island or somewhere where this stuff isn't happening, and it's just amateur sports. But I don't know why we're pretending that like the University of Alabama and schools like that, it's amateur sports. And so maybe those schools, maybe they just need to carve it out and form a professional league sponsored by universities. And just get out of it.
I mean, and that would open a whole nother can of worms about the tax structure. Because, I mean, part of the reason some of these are profitable is the fact that hey, we built a stadium on campus. We don't have to pay the same taxes for that.
Well, yeah, and there's the Ed O'Bannon case established that student athletes are not employees, okay? And so what that does is that kept universities from paying workers' comp insurance, which is a huge, gigantic amount of money. And so that is something they're also trying to protect. And we need to move on here. But I guess the last thing I guess the last thing we can say about this is there's a real problem with having different states having different laws. The NCAA is right about this also, because you can't have essentially professionals in California but not in Florida. Florida's a bad example because there's a bill in Florida too. That's a bad example, like Texas. You can't. Yeah, okay. And
Florida's so actually not a bad example because it's such a hotbed for talent anyway.
Yeah, but there's a bill in Florida too that's pending, so that's why I carved that out. You can't. If you have different rules, you almost can't have an NCAA playoffs. You almost can't have it.
Not multi-state like that. You could actually make an argument that if you were to dissolve the NCAA and different rules in different states, schools just can't play out of state anymore. You got to play even playing field. So bring it back to what it was, I don't know, 100 years ago before you had like these conferences that span half the country. So, and I guess that's where we'll leave you. It's not just if you listen to ESPN radio and you hear like Mike Golick talk and guys like that, they're only focused on the effect on the student athletes. And I understand that. I mean, they're ball players and these ESPN guys, and that's what they care about. But what they're ignoring is that there is a lot of chaos that it would bring that somebody's going to have to solve, and nobody's come up with a solution. That's what the NCAA is right about. But listen. And I think that you and I are both, in the end, we're for the players getting the money.
As a general construct, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
General philosophy, yes, that's good.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
I mean, we're far from. I think this is going to be another couple years before this all gets sorted out.
Without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt. Okay, so let's move on to something that I actually laughed and chuckled about and took pleasure from, and that's the death of Deadspin. So just to back up here, Deadspin a number of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago now, got released a Hulk Hogan sex tape, which is first.
No. Gawker released the sex.
Gawker released a sex tape, which is but Deadspin took it. Gawker was the parent company of Deadspin.
Correct.
So Deadspin had it, and first of all, as an aside, who the heck wants to watch a Hulk Hogan sex tape? But somebody did.
A lot of people with some weird fetishes. Man.
Yeah, exactly. So, so Hulk sued Gawker and won a gigantic judgment, and what that did is
over $100 million or something.
Yeah,
like that.
some crazy number, and that put Gawker into bankruptcy because once you go into bankruptcy, unsecured judgments don't have to be paid, basically, except as to what the court establishes, which is pennies on the dollar. And so then Deadspin was sold at a bankruptcy auction, and Univision bought the whole thing.
Which, by the way, we sleep, I think, as Americans on how much crap Univision just buys.
Yeah, that's true. Univision is a whole lot. You just think Univision is like the Hispanic television. Yeah, stuff, it's way bigger than that. So Univision bought Gawker, and so it was running Deadspin. Then Univision sold Deadspin and all of Gawker, the former Gawker Media assets, to something called Gizmodo Media Group. I screwed that up.
Geo Media.
Yeah, Geo Media. Yeah. So Geo Media was the current owner. And just this past week, Geo Media demanded that Deadspin stick to sports. Now, the reason why I've never liked Deadspin is that they get very political. They get into kind of this like woke culture, which drives me insane. And so I tend to not read Deadspin. So what happened, and I think that's what Geo Media is trying to get away from, is alienating people like me, just telling them stick to sports, and you want to alienate the Steves of the world. So Deadspin fired the editor-in-chief, and then all of the writers quit en masse in protest. Right. And so right now, as we record this, there is not one writer employed by Deadspin.
Right. Deadspin's a website. It just doesn't have anybody writing.
Has no content. No new content. So I don't know what
Steve, you're a pretty good writer. You want to...
I mean, I'm exactly what they want, right? If you want to stick to sports, I'm all about it. I'm not going to give you
you don't have a good sense of humor, and you just write boring sports topics.
Exactly, that's exactly what you want, and I'm good. I'm a better writer, and frankly, all of them. So I don't know what your.
I don't know. I did love their "Why Your Team Sucks" stories. Those were fun.
Yeah, but they bashed the Redskins, and I don't like that.
They bashed everybody, Steve. They did it for all 32
I quit
teams.
reading Deadspin years ago because they drove me insane. I don't know how you feel about it. I'm personally glad that it's gone. Presume that now the website, like you said, is not gone. They're going to hire new writers. It's just this crop of writers is gone. They're going to find a bunch of new writers to do this. So I don't know what your thoughts are. I'm happy about it.
I mean, here's my thing. I think there's always a place for good, snarky, satirical sports writers. Dan Steinberg, we had him on our show once, and he's probably one of my favorite DC-based sports writers of all time, just because he's so good at making fun of everything and not taking sports seriously. There's a place for that. I don't care one way or the other about politics. People put politics in sports all the time that I don't agree with. People put in that I do agree with. I'm not one of these people who is afraid of politics in sports. To me, sports is the perfect place for politics because it's, logically, sports is a political game, just like politics is a political game. You have opposing sides. There's a whole philosophy to it that I understand.
Yeah, but like Dan, for example, largely kept out of it. Dan was being satirical about the funny aspects of it, sure. And he was not marrying sports and politics in sports in his stuff. And Dan's more of an editor now.
He didn't use it as a crutch.
Right, and that's what Deadspin did.
There's a lot of writers who did use it as a crutch. The other big crutch with a lot of satirical writing these days is people who just are dependent on, hey, something dumb happened, let's post 40 Twitter reactions, and that's a story, which I can't stand. If you want to talk about what Deadspin did too much of that I couldn't stand, it's that kind of story.
That's the laziest journalism ever.
It is, and it's become way too common in a lot of these snark-based political and sports columns and stuff like that.
Sometimes
Especially those two areas.
Sometimes I think half of Yahoo News is just about Twitter reactions.
It's probably more than half at this point.
Yeah, whatever. It's a lot. And the idea of just saying, okay, our story is, let's post a bunch of random Twitter reactions to some pop culture thing. That's not news. And the other thing is there's enough Twitter reactions on every side to create whatever story you want to create. It's not really reporting honest reactions of the public, because there might be a story in like the public's honest reaction to something. That could be a valid story, but when you just invent your angle by selectively taking a bunch of randos on Twitter and gluing them into an article in WordPress and publishing it, that's not news. And that's part of Deadspin did that a lot, and that's one of the reasons I didn't like them.
Deadspin does it a lot. Every major news outlet is become dependent on that, and I'm including your big CNNs, Foxes, and they are all dependent on this kind of reporting. I'm using air quotes here.
Twitter erupted Thursday afternoon when, that's the headline you see. So what happens from here is a Deadspin. The Geo Media is going to hire a new editor. They're going to hire new writers who are going to stick to the script. That what Geo Media wants.
What's interesting to me is typically if you buy one of these Deadspins, whatever, you're not buying it to strip it like this. Usually, you don't often buy an outlet if you don't think it's working, whatever they're doing. And I always find it weird that somebody would buy someone like Deadspin who, all right, they're not really known as like a hard-hitting reporter. They're known for, like I said, more this satire-based writing. Why would you buy it and then get all pissy and fire everybody?
Well, you see, we don't know the numbers, though, Alex. The problem is...
That's true. We don't know the numbers.
They know the numbers.
No one does.
Well, and what Geo Media is claiming is all this like woke culture stuff that you guys are reporting or keeping our numbers down or keeping our clicks down, which is hurting business. That's what Geo Media is claiming, and we have no ability to know whether they're right or wrong. What I do know is that no business guys like this would fire everybody, without the numbers to back it up.
Well, and remember, they didn't fire everybody.
They fired the
one guy, and everybody.
But they knew what was going to happen. They should have known what was going to happen. If they didn't, they were stupid. They should have known.
I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, they could have Bruce Allen the situation.
They could have.
We didn't know this,
Yeah, but what I guess, regardless of whether or not they knew the whole writing staff was going to quit, what they do know are the numbers, and they do have some business guys. And by the way, this is just. Geo Media is a private equity thing, and so these are a bunch of Wall Street guys who basically own this. Just let's be clear that that's what we're talking about here, because again, it's owned by a private equity firm, Great Hill Partners and Spanfeller. I don't know who they are, but that's almost assuredly a Wall Street private equity group. Okay, but what they do know, they have some numbers-based business reason for believing that the number of clicks that they're getting, which is their income, is directly harmed by Deadspin doing what Deadspin does. So they have some basis for it. What happens from here, we'll see. Maybe they just disband it. Who knows?
I mean,
I doubt it.
It's going to be interesting to see. And if it disbands, then the business guys clearly screwed the pooch.
Yeah, because they want to make money off the asset, and so the idea of Deadspin just going away is not smart either. That's not what they want. They want the Deadspin name, which has value, to make more money, and they think they can do that by becoming sort of a stick to sports asset.
I don't know. I mean, here's the thing: we, even though we're kind of on the edges of this business, it's not like we have any idea like what CBS Sports is making. And if we're talking vanilla, to me, CBS Sports' website is probably the most vanilla of all of them. And you can't tell me that. If you were to ask me who do you want to write for, I would have picked old Deadspin over writing for someone like CBS Sports.
I'd pick CBS Sports,
right?
And I mean, I don't. You understand this because you've been around me long enough. But some of you out there who are younger may not understand that there's a whole segment of society that I'm part of that gets really, really turned off by marrying this like political culture stuff with sports. It makes me want to hurl. I don't want to see it. I don't want to read it. Sports is an escape, and I don't want to be preached at. And that's what Geo Media thinks, that they can increase their income through drawing more people like me in. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying that's what their strategy is. And some of you just don't understand out there that there's a lot of people like me who want to see
Steve,
none of it.
We understand.
You
we
understand.
Just don't care.
Maybe, but, I mean, who has more money and time?
Probably in your group.
Well, except that Geo Media seems to take my side of it.
Right. Well, it's a bunch of Wall Street guys.
It is a bunch of Wall Street guys.
It's not a bunch of reporters and hipsters who start websites like Deadspin.
Of course, I think social media is inundated with people like that. People like me are not.
True.
People like me don't do a lot of social media and preaching and all that stuff. There's a lot of the quiet majority out there is probably more like me than the Deadspin people.
Well, the majority isn't reading either. I'm just saying.
That's for sure. But that's for sure. But
if
if
they're on social media, they're not reading Deadspin. Period.
But if Deadspin becomes like a legit sports media outlet, maybe they would. That's like I would never go to Deadspin for anything. But if it becomes a legit sports media outlet, I might start reading it, and that's what the idea is.
I just don't think they're going to have the resources, because what you need to do that is you need beat reporters in all 140 professional locker rooms, or however many.
Like the Athletic did. Yeah, and I'm not saying it's going to work. I'm just saying that that's the strategy. So
no, I think the Athletic is the better business model of all of them.
Yeah, well, they have money. They have
money backing them, and they're actually getting people to subscribe, which I find amazing.
All right, let's move on. We could we could dance on Deadspin's grave forever, but we're gonna go for our last story here. We're gonna go to something that's near and dear to Alex's heart.
Yeah, my broken heart now,
which is
very depressing.
The death of the Arena Football League. Alex, tell us what happened.
Well, okay, so everyone knows I'm a huge Arena Football fan. The Arena Football League, most people probably know, it's died before and come back. This happened when the recession hit us in 2007. The AFL, because it's mostly managed by Wall Street or owned by Wall Street guys, went belly up, went bankrupt around then. And they went bankrupt, came back 2 years later in 2009. What they came back as was a shell of the original Arena Football League. A lot of teams were like small markets, like Spokane, or there was a team in Alabama, and I don't even know what city in Alabama, because I don't think of Alabama of having major cities anyway. But they had like a team.
Sounds like a typical, true, arrogant Northeasterner.
Exactly. Because it failed too. From 2009 to 2012, they were with some insurance company, and this pertains to what happened. I've never heard of them before. The National Union Fire Insurance Company, who apparently managed, I'm guessing, the liability insurance for the league at that time from 2009 to 2012. And they are now suing the Arena Football League for failing to pay premiums from that span of time. Now, here's where it gets interesting. It's a 4-year or 3-year span, $2.4 million lawsuit. But we're talking 7 years ago, which I find, like, why the hold on that lawsuit for 7 years? And Steve, you're a lawyer. Maybe you can explain.
I haven't read the petition. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and I've only seen the cover of, like, the first page of the suit, which I found online. In 2009 to 2012, the league was structured very differently. It was every team's owned by, an individual like the NFL, like Major League Baseball, and then you had the central company. When in the current structure, which is probably since 2016, I want to say, Ted Leonsis and Ron Jaworski own the whole league. They have a commissioner who they pick, but every team is owned by basically those two guys.
Not basically.
Yeah. Well, they were going to expand to add another owner this year. They were going to go to 10 teams, so they were going to add more.
Yeah, let's stop right there, because earlier this Arena League offseason, the Arena League announced they were going to expand to 10, right?
Right.
You were 6. Yeah, you were very excited. And so
people
once
like me who cared.
Yeah. Once this lawsuit happened, and there's a judgment, right? Is there a judgment now in this lawsuit?
No, it's just a lawsuit, from what I understand.
So the Arena League, as a result of the danger of the threat of this judgment, had to cease operations. Which is just amazing to me that a $2.4 million judgment, okay, and you throw in attorney's fees, so add another $1 million to it, so you're talking like $3.5 million probably in total. That's going to bankrupt a company. If that's going to bankrupt your league, then you don't have a league in the first place. Then you're really dancing on the pin, the head of a pin. If $3.5 million, which is a ton of money, you and I, and we declare bankruptcy, if there was that big of a but a major sports league, that shouldn't be what bankrupts you. So that tells me that this league had no foundation whatsoever, and they probably shouldn't have expanded because they didn't have the resources in the first place. That's what it tells me.
And this is where it gets a little complicated because they haven't declared bankruptcy yet. The league is saying they're basically going to try and restructure to survive this.
But they ceased operations, so you need to say that.
Yes, they
ceased operations.
I emailed them 1 hour after the story came out to say, "Hey, I've already paid money on season tickets.
Did they do it?
And no. The email address was already shut down.
We're gonna keep your money.
Tickets at WashingtonValor.com shut down.
You're going to have to sue them yourself to get your money
Probably.
back. Yeah.
I'm going to be out $300.
Yeah, because you spend more than that, to get your money back. Okay, but anyway, as we speak, there is no season. There are no teams. What the commissioner of the AFL did say is what they hadn't completely said no to is the idea of kind of a barnstorming league in the style of what's the Dr. Dre own? Yeah, thank you. The doctor in the spirit of the Big Three.
It's Ice Cube.
Sorry, you're right. Yeah, Ice Cube. I was mixing my rappers up, which isn't surprising because I could name like 3 of them. But yeah, anyway, so it's like the spirit of the Ice Cube owned Big Three, which is a barnstorming league. They every Friday we talked about on this show. Every Friday they go around to another arena and play a bunch of games. AFL specifically, the AFL commissioner explicitly said that that idea
what they do.
That might be what to do from here. So we'll see.
And I hope not because the infrastructure you need to build a indoor football stadium, a little more complicated than a basketball stadium.
Yeah, you could play basketball anywhere.
Right, and I mean, they basically just say, all right, whose NBA team are we going to go visit today for that Big Three league? The AFL has to bring in an indoor football field. They have to hang those 2 giant field goal posts on either end, which you can do it, but to break it down, go to another city every week, that's a hell of a carnival show.
Well, and let's be clear also that this guy was just spitballing.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think it's completely dead, or not yet officially. I think I follow guys like the head of the players union, and he's really pushing them to try and find a solution. And Ted Leonsis has said a few things where he's like not completely given up yet, but it doesn't look good. I would say 20% chance it survives at this point.
Yeah, I would say that if you want to use a medical analogy, this patient just went into cardiac arrest, and the doctors are standing above him with those electroshock things, and they're shocking they're shocking the heart, and it's still not beating. That's not to say it might not beat at some point, but it's not beating currently.
It's not good.
Yeah.
Now, but there's a couple of things that I do find interesting, and I know from a legal perspective, Steve, I'm not a lawyer, but I know enough to say, even though ownership of the league has changed 3 times since this lawsuit would have, that 2012 end date of the lawsuit, the Arena Football League's been bought and sold, has had new owners, new commissioners about 3 times since then. I know that doesn't matter legally speaking, but everything named in the lawsuit, it's like 40 teams that existed in that span, all of whom are defunct. It's the only 2 groups that are still around are the Philadelphia Soul and the main AFL 1, Arena Football League.
Yeah, but if you're going to file a lawsuit like that, you're going to sue all those entities. And
But if this was a $2.4 million whatever against, finding, who pays for those teams?
Well, they'd all be joint and severally liable for it. And so what that means is that you get a $2.4 million judgment. All of them have liability for $2.4 million. That's not to say that all of them would, if they actually have the money, they're not going to get 20 times the award. It would eventually get split out. But if there's only 2 of the 20 entities left, both of those are on the hook for the $2.4 million. And if they all have some money, yeah, sure, they'll split it to pay it. but it's not split up via the judgment. All of the entities owe it. Does that answer your question?
That's kind of where I kind of get confused because, like I said, if there's and I put 40, it's probably more like 20 teams. Like, do those former owners have any?
Well, yeah, I mean, and by the way, that concept's called joint and several liability. But yeah, so those entities, I mean, yes, they probably don't exist anymore. Doesn't mean you can't file a lawsuit against them. It just means they're judgment proof, because the owners of the business entities are going to be shielded through the corporate structure from individual liability, probably.
Sure.
And so you're probably suing a bunch of non-existent bankrupt entities, but the entities that exist aren't bankrupt, and the league itself isn't bankrupt. So I think the move would be, as long as you're doing it, file all of them, but you just know that realistically your targets are like a handful. That's what they're shooting.
And I mean, the only other thing to wrap this topic up is I'm kind of surprised that, Leonsis and Jaworski, I mean, Jaworski was still one of the owners back then, but I'm surprised they didn't know this lawsuit would have been coming.
I'm just still shocked that that's what's going to drive this company into non-existence is $2.4 million. The NFL, Major League Baseball, and the NBA wouldn't even get off their couch for $2.4 million.
No, but I mean, we're talking about a league that makes a fraction of what.
And as it turns out, a very small fraction.
Right.
It's just amazing, and I'm sad to see it go because I know there's a group of hardcore fans that I watched a couple games when we did our ill-fated Valor cast.
Episodes of trying to do a Valor podcast.
Yeah, and it's an entertaining product. I'll give it that. It's an entertaining product. So I'm sad to see it go. I don't think this barnstorming thing is going to work for a variety of reasons.
No.
Number one, like you said, the logistics of it are really tough. Number two, nobody cares. That's not going to change anything.
Like, if you're going to go play out of markets that you're in, like who in I don't know, Iowa is going to care about seeing
nobody.
The Washington Valor play Baltimore over
there? Are you going to go like rent out, like what's the arena in Chicago, where the Bulls play, and you're going to do all that? Are you really going to sell 20,000 tickets to that? No, you're going to
8,000 people a game.
You're going to sell 20 tickets. If it's a barnstorming thing, at least like for the Valor, you cared because it's a DC thing, and that's why you went. And I understand that, and that's what their business plan was. But the Big Three works because they have names.
Right. It's a lot of ex-players.
Yeah, there's names, and that's why they can get TV ratings. And the barnstorming part of it is really just saving costs more than anything. But it's really about getting eyeballs on TV on the product, and that's not going to happen.
DC, man, I want to go see a Big Three game.
They'll get there.
Yeah,
they'll make their way around. Anyway, it's just really a cost saving thing more than anything. And so, but it's still in the case of the Arena League, you still have nobody watching. That's a problem.
Well, and I mean, we've talked about this with other minor football leagues. The Arena League finally kind of got their finances in order where the players were making okay money. I think they were making $40,000 a game. And that's decent. That's not great, but it wasn't bankrupting the teams like it was back in the early 2000s.
Except that a $2.4 million lawsuit, not even a judgment, for the threat of a judgment for $2.5 million ended the league. So their finances were never in order.
Well, but more in order than when they went bankrupt in 2009 or 2007 is my point.
I guess, yeah. I mean, which is not saying much.
Right. Well, back then, players were making like $250,000 each, which is nuts to think about for a minor league.
Yeah. So I guess what we've learned today is that Deadspin and the Arena League will meet in the annals of former sports outlets, deceased sports outlets. We'll see what happens with both. I think that's going to wrap up the show here for today. We'll see Chris back on the next one. We'll see John back at some point soon. Alex, do you want to give your Twitter handle out in case anybody cares?
35332.
All right.
That's where you can find me.
You can't find me anywhere, but you can find me at least some of the time on the Hogsty Twitter at the Hogsty. So we will see you guys in the next show.